संसार दावानल निरलोका प्राणाय कारुण्य घनाघनत्यम्.
One of his supporters was Allen Ginsberg, the hippie poet, the beatnik poet. He refers to Prabhupada as the downtown Swami, because many Swamis are coming, they're going uptown. Uptown means where the wealthy people live. And so they want to cater to the wealthy people. Prabhupada, he goes downtown, where the poor people live. The hippies who have no money, they don't know what to do. And so Allen Ginsberg becomes a very, very close friend to Srila Prabhupada. He gives his name and his reputation to present the teachings of Srila Prabhupada. And one of his articles, actually it was written in the article by Allen Ginsberg in the first edition of Bhagavad Gita, which was an edition which was a limited edition. It wasn't a it was an abridged. It didn't contain the entire text. It was, Macmillan didn't want to print. It was too big of a text. So they cut out and limited the edition only to maybe 200 pages. But Allen Ginsberg, he says about Swami Prabhupada, he said, what kindness, what humility, what intelligence. So he's expressing this sentiment about Srila Prabhupada. But you know, Prabhupada, even though the hippies, they appreciate Prabhupada, still, and even Allen Ginsberg, still they had many differences of opinion. On one hand, what are the hippies? They want free love, free drugs. That's the motto of the hippies, free love, free drugs. What is Prabhupada? No illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling, and a vegetarian diet. And now, even though with these restrictions, people are coming to that little storefront, 26 2nd Avenue. And many people are coming there. Pretty soon, actually, they moved to a bigger place, 3 streets down to 61 2nd Avenue. So many people were becoming devotees. Now the hippies, they had their own slogans. Now as Hare Krishna devotees, what is their slogan? Stay high forever. No more coming down. So when you take LSD or you take marijuana, you get a sensation, what they call a high. But they say, if you take marijuana or LSD, you'll be high for a few minutes, you'll come back down. If you chant Hare Krishna, you stay high forever. There's no coming down. This is the new slogan of the hippies. So in the early part of 1967, the Hare Krishna begins to emerge in San Francisco. So these are main places where the hippies are congregating. In New York, Lower East Side, in San Francisco, in the Haight-Ashbury district. And at that time, Mukunda Swami, he's not a Swami at that time, but he goes there to open up a storefront. Allen Ginsberg is also there. And they have, this is a poster for the Avalon Ballroom. There's a big fundraising event for the Hare Krishna movement. And all of the big musical groups that come there to play, to raise funds for the Hare Krishna movement. And also Prabhupada goes there, and Allen Ginsberg introduces Srila Prabhupada to the hippie community. And not only that is Allen Ginsberg, Prabhupada actually asks Allen Ginsberg to lead the chanting of the holy name. And so pretty soon, now the movement is starting to take off. The Hare Krishna becomes very popular in San Francisco and Los Angeles. And then a year or so later, in 1968 and 1969, the Beatles meet the Hare Krishna devotees in London. And George Harrison, he produces an album that soon goes to the top of the charts. It becomes one of the big sellers for a few months. And George Harrison also gives a huge donation, $19,000. This is in 19 71. That's a lot of money in those days, $19,000 to print the Krishna book. And in the Krishna book, George Harrison, he writes the introduction. I request that you take advantage of this book, Krishna, and enter it into its understanding. I also request that you make an appointment to meet your God now through the self-liberating process of yoga and give peace a chance. All you need is love, or Krishna, Hari Bol. And so now, within a few short years, this is really extraordinary, because here's a gentleman, Srila Prabhupada, he's 70 years old, getting to be 72, 73, 74. This is an age when people are usually retired, when they're usually settling down, they're relaxing. But now Prabhupada is constantly traveling all over the world to make sure that the Hare Krishna movement is functioning properly. If the new devotees have a proper understanding of this teaching of Bhagavad Gita. And now you have parties of chanting in major cities all over the world, in Germany, Paris, New York City. Here's in Melbourne, Australia. This is in Mexico. And in 1971, Prabhupada, this is a very famous picture, Prabhupada in Moscow. He goes there for only 5 days. He goes there to talk to a professor. He requests the professor, his name is Kartovsky, he requests the professor, can I make a presentation for the college group, in your college? And the professor, he laughs. He says, Swamiji, this is communism. We can't allow you to make a presentation. But even though Prabhupada was only there for 5 days, he did meet one young gentleman, and he initiated that one young gentleman. And from that 5-day event, this young man spent several days with Prabhupada. Prabhupada gave him whatever he could over these few days, whatever knowledge and whatever blessing that this young man could absorb. Prabhupada initiated him. His name is Ananta Shakti. And he actually was able to introduce Krishna consciousness in Russia, but at great, great hardship. He was thrown in prison. He was interrogated. He was, what do they call when they torture you? So many different problems that he encountered. But today, there's also the chanting of Hare Krishna on the streets of Moscow. And on the streets of South Africa, both black and white and Hindus are getting together to chant Hare Krishna. And by 1972 and 73, there's hundreds and hundreds of devotees from all over the world going back to Mayapur, where this chanting originated on the streets of Mayapur. And now they're going back and they're walking down the same boulevards and the same avenues that Chaitanya had traversed 500 years earlier. And so, to finish up, Prabhupada, age 70, without any funds, came to America to fulfill Chaitanya's prophecy that the chanting of Hare Krishna would spread all over the world. In the last 12 years of his life, Prabhupada circled the globe 14 times. He opened up 80 Krishna centers, temples, communities. He also developed in India food relief programs. Prabhupada said that no one should go hungry within 10 miles of a temple or any religious institution. Whether it's a temple or a church or a mosque, that religious institution has a responsibility to make sure that no one goes hungry. Otherwise, it's a great embarrassment to that religious institution. So Prabhupada instilled in the devotees this urgency to help feed people. And I think Yogeshwar mentioned, or someone mentioned in one talk, one devotee asked Prabhupada, shouldn't we have them chant Hare Krishna first? Because here in America, what they did for the Sunday feast, when people came, what they did is they had the chanting Hare Krishna, then they had a lecture, and then they had arti, and then they had a feast. But here Prabhupada in India is saying, no, there's no need to chant Hare Krishna. First, just go out and feed the people. Don't worry about chanting Hare Krishna. First, people need to get their basic human needs satisfied, and then they can chant Hare Krishna. So it was different. Here, the devotees had grown up in a different mentality. Oh, first give the philosophy, first give the chanting, and then later on you can have the dinner. That's the way it was at the Sunday feast. And so anyways, Prabhupada, he translated and wrote, just during his life, at least 60 volumes of books. And Prabhupada, in 1977 in Vrindaban, India, Prabhupada passed away from this world at the age of 82, chanting Hare Krishna, surrounded by his loving disciples. And eventually, in the late 90s, the mayor of New York, Giuliani, he installed a plaque, because that place in Tompkins Square Park where Prabhupada chanted, that's a famous place. People go there. And so the Hare Krishna movement requested Giuliani, and he had this plaque installed. One of the things it says on the plaque, this is right where Prabhupada chanted, underneath that tree that Prabhupada stood. This is one of the things it says on the plaque. In October 9th, 1966, Prabhupada and his followers sat beneath this tree and held the first outdoor chanting session outside of India. Participants chanted for 2 hours as they danced and played cymbals, tambourines, and other percussive instruments. This event is recognized as the founding of the Hare Krishna religion in the United States. And so this chanting of Hare Krishna can bring one, this material world is described as an ocean of suffering. And this chanting can lift one out of that ocean of material suffering. Because especially, we're living in the Kali Yuga. The Kali Yuga, there's so much anxiety. There's so much stress. Just to give, for instance, myself, I own a house up the road. So if there's something that goes wrong with the house, I don't know how to fix it. I'm not a plumber. I don't know, I can't fix the roof. Whatever needs to be done, I have to pay for. Also, I own a car, but I'm not a mechanic. If I need some help, then I have to pay for a mechanic. I also have a computer. If something goes wrong, then I have to go to the Geek Squad. I don't know how to operate the computer. So in the Kali Yuga, the life is very complicated. In older days, people, they lived a simple lifestyle, but the motto, just like Prabhupada asked here in this New Vrindaban community, Prabhupada gave the motto, simple living, high thinking. So we try to follow that to some degree. But of course, you can't get away from it. We have cars, we have computers. Prabhupada wanted a self-sufficiency. I've been living here in New Vrindavan for over 40 years now. My wife and I moved here in 1976. And I travel a lot. I do programs at colleges. I do many different types of presentations. I do dramatic storytelling presentations. I also put together some books that I have available. If you'd like to take a look at, I have Mahabharata. I recently wrote a couple of years back, which won an award, and it's being used in college campuses, and a few other things and other materials. I have a series of CDs. One of them is called Hanuman's Quest. And this is stories, dramatic storytelling that I do with music. The music is supplied by some of the devotees here in New Vrindavan. They play the tablas and the sitar and the tampura, different musical instruments. So, and this is recorded here in New Vrindavan. So it's like a New Vrindaban product. But anyways, if you'd like to take a look at some of these things, I also have a flyer, a yellow flyer on the desk that tells you about some of the different programs that I offer. But we have a few minutes left for some question and answers. Does anybody have any final questions or thoughts? Yes? And their guide and their guru. So in this way, when the guru leaves this world, then there's some confusion by the disciples. And now, over the last 20 years, I would say that the Hare Krishna movement is becoming much more mature and much more stable. Because in the old days, in the early 70s and late 60s and early 70s when I joined, you have the hippies. Mostly the hippies were joining the Hare Krishna movement. People who were kind of like confused with drugs, so much intoxication, and Prabhupada lifted them out of that intoxication and gave them Krishna consciousness. But the mentality of the hippies was to, what they say, to get over on society. To get over means that in whatever way you can, you take advantage of society. You don't pay any taxes. You don't do this. You take drugs. You do whatever you want. You just get over on society. And so with this mentality, that seeped in to the Hare Krishna movement. And so Prabhupada used to say to the devotees, he wanted them to distribute the books. He wanted them to push on the mission. And he used to use this term, by hook or by crook. So Prabhupada grew up in British India. This terminology is a British term. It's actually a seaman's term. Hook and crook are two different tools that the seamen use. And so if you can't do it with a hook, then you do it with a crook, by hook or by crook. So the devotees, when they heard this, they were thinking, oh, by hook or by crook? That means I could do any deviant activity that I want to push on. I could cheat, I could do this, I could do that, I could take advantage of people, I could cheat people to push on the Hare Krishna movement. But that's not what Prabhupada's intention was. Hook or crook, if you look at the definition, this is an old English term. And so the devotees were very confused. And in those days, of course, devotees were so confused that if to become a disciple, you had to move into the temple. You couldn't live outside the temple. It would be too confusing for these new American disciples. But they had to have the shelter of the temple environment. Nowadays, the movement has become more mature. People can get initiated. They don't have to move into the temple. They don't have to give up their livelihood or their profession or their ambitions in college. They can remain in college. They can get a college education. In those days, many people were dropping out of college to join the movement. People only became involved, they only became exposed to the Hare Krishna movement within a few weeks. People would drop out and join the movement after becoming exposed within a few weeks. So there was already so much confusion, so much disturbance and within the young people. Prabhupada lifted them out of that, just like you saw that picture of them lifting them up out of the water. But there was a residual effect, a residual emotional effect from the hippie days, from your rebellious days. And that began to damage the Hare Krishna movement, because people were doing so many things, the devotees were doing so many things in such a devious way, in one way or another. They weren't doing it properly. They weren't having genuine relationships with each other. Nowadays, I'm happy to say that the movement is much more mature, and we have people that you don't have to move into the temple. People are mature, they have the association, they could come to within their communities. So it's a very glorious time. It's a very hopeful time for this Hare Krishna movement. And so I don't want to burden you with so many different things, but I thank you so very, very much for your kind attention and to allow me to share these thoughts with you. But I just want to mention one last thing, because when you think about religious movements and how religion spread all over the world, usually you think about, for instance, like the Quakers. They come, or the early Americans, they come, they bring their religious group with them, and they come across the ocean, and they settle in a strange land, and they come as groups. Or religion spreads by armies. You have the conquerors from Europe going into Mexico, going into the Incas in South America, and going into the Mayan community and to the Aztec community. They're bringing their armies, they're fighting, they're destroying, they're conquering, and their priests come with the armies and indoctrinate the people. And the same thing the Muslims did also in the Near East, and going into Iran and Afghanistan and coming into India. They also invaded and they also ruled and converted people through indoctrination, through force. But here, this is actually one of the extraordinary events in history. When Srila Prabhupada came, a harmless old man, he didn't have any money to bribe anybody with. He couldn't threaten anybody. He didn't threaten anybody. He didn't say, if you don't follow me, then you're going to hell. He didn't say anything like that. Actually, he honored all religions. So Prabhupada, actually, people wonder, why did Americans, they join this Hare Krishna? Because if you ask people from different religions, they say, if you don't follow my religion, then you're going to hell. But a real Hindu will never say that. A real Hindu honors all religions. And Prabhupada, he was a real, genuine Hindu. Actually, we usually don't use that term. Once in India or someplace, an Indian gentleman asked Prabhupada, what is Hinduism? Prabhupada said, Hinduism means to do good to others. So that's what we want. Prabhupada said that we have become fortunate, now go out and make others fortunate. And so this is our opportunity, because my presentation is about preaching about Prabhupada. And so if you make this available to your friends and to your associates, especially actually my Mahabharata is meant for an American audience. But anyways, I don't want to take up too much of your time. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.